Title of this morning's Dharma talk is A Raw Heart, a Raw Heart. Before I talk about that, I'm going to read a poem from the 14th century Chinese poet by the name of Stonehouse. This is our favorite translator, Red Pine, who translates Heart Sutra, Diamond Sutra, Lankavatara Sutra, and so on. This is short. This is a longer poem. This is just a small section of it. Can't read Chinese, or I would read the Chinese, because it's here also. I'm working on it. Pardon me. That's why I don't read this. Very well. You have to let go of everything. Buddhahood has to go too. Each thought becomes a demon. Opening your mouth invites trouble. Accept what karma brings and live your life in freedom. Use the Dharma for your practice. Lead your ox to the mill. That's a good commentary on choicelessness. I've got a handkerchief somewhere here. Nobody left. I'm going to blame this on lack of sleep. Somewhat emotional. So what is a raw heart? Trungpa Rinpoche used a metaphor, similar metaphor. He called it the genuine heart of sadness. Genuine heart of sadness, in order to support those who were on the path, who were working with their passion, aggression, ignorance, their difficulty, their depression, or their negative feelings, or the cloud that tends to follow some of us around, kind of gloomy, especially if you've been practicing for 4 or 5 years, a dozen years. We would like to know how long this is going to take. That's quite often what happens, especially in the first 2 or 3 years. It takes a long time, I can tell you. Unless you're one of those amazing beings who has a spontaneous awakening. Better that you don't have one of those, because what happens when you have a spontaneous awakening, you grab it and you hang on to it, you milk it. Whereas if it takes a while, and then you have and the contrast shows up in a different way. It doesn't show up as, I used to be this way, now I'm this way. So a raw heart. So it's another metaphor to help you, certainly helps me, to let you know that when you go into any kind of negative or difficult emotion or feeling, please don't object, don't agree, don't look away. Those are the 3 basic ways of avoiding. Seems to be necessary. So a raw heart means that you've, my image I sometimes use, you've dropped down out of this paranoia of thinking, and you've risen up out of this hope and fear that is always looking for advantage or disadvantage in the gut, and is run by the seventh consciousness or the ego or the klesha mind. And you go into this raw. It's raw because it's unfiltered. It's uncovered. It's unprotected. And that feeling that the ego has when this starts to show up, this is called bodhichitta, by the way, the mind of awakening. bodhichitta. It's a Sanskrit word. Bodhichitta. So when this starts to show up and we start to rise out of this and drop down out of this and start to notice this, we feel sad. We feel maybe disappointed. We might feel raw. That's what the ego mind actually does something with that. It looks at it as something to get rid of, or it must be wrong, or shouldn't feel this way, or something needs to change. I need to change my meds. I need to take meds. I need to stop taking meds. I need to. We're always looking for what? Something else. Like it says on Sunlit Clouds rock suit, nothing else. That I wrote on there when I ordained her in 2010. Was it 2010? So the idea of the raw heart is a raw heart doesn't want anything. It's kind of like, just to use conventional language, it's kind of like when you're just bummed out, you're just sitting there and you know nothing's going to work. So you don't really want anything. You kind of want to be left alone in a way. You might even not really care whether you get better or whether this goes away or not. There's something genuine, and I think that's why Trungpa Rinpoche referred to that as a genuine heart of sadness. There's something very genuine about being at what you could call the end of the road. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing to do. Very similar to the feeling that the Stonehouse, this poem, evokes. Even the Buddha has to go. But of course, these are just ideas, because fundamentally, especially if you receive the precepts or the refuge vow formally, then to the 16 precepts, then to separate sentient beings and Buddhas is to break the 10th grave precept, as you probably know if you've read anything about that. But of course, that's what precepts are for, is to see the way we break them. It's why we observe those rather than cling to them, support them, or accuse others of not. It's really an odd feeling to have someone accuse you of breaking your precepts. Anyone had that happen? Had someone else say, you don't have to say what it is, has anyone ever said to you, well, don't you think you're breaking that precept? Kind of like your parent or something. Much different kind of situation that we have here in Buddhism. Basic teaching of the Buddha is everything. Everything. Find something, point to it, ask me about it. Everything is dependently arisen. There is no solid, separate thing anywhere at all. That makes it really difficult when you're trying to get ahead in the world, manipulate your mind, manipulate others, train your cat. But you can't do that. Train your cat. Might be good exercise. Go train your cat. Well, there's a waste of time. Well, except for Yahtzee. I think Yahtzee minded pretty well. Like, go lay down, you go lay down. So everything's dependently arisen. So if that's the case, how do we even navigate that at all? Yesterday we had people were monks here or soon to be ordained. People were gave talks on ethics and how the 16 precepts, how the ethics, understanding of what kind of values that we have, how those show up in the precepts, rather than having another list of do's and don'ts, which is the Western model that tries to control everything. Buddha Dharma is not about control. There may be a lot of controls happening there, but it's not about controlling. It's about, what's it about?
Awareness.
It's about awareness. It's about being aware. And those talks were very good. I think it's the first time I've given people a week or so to, or at least 4 or 5 days to think about. Usually I tell you an hour ahead of time the topic that you'll talk about. Raw heart. So if that begins to occur to you, rather than name it depression, or rather than name it a problem, rather than even name it a raw heart, that's the one I'm using. You might name it something else. You might not name it. You might just notice that this is hard. We've all been here forever. We've been doing this. When I say we, these bodies are pretty new, but who we are, who we fundamentally are, this has been going on since beginning of time. We show up in a relative situation where there's actually clocks with hands moving. What's that about? You can't see time, and you project space. You can't see that either. I mean, you literally can't see space. You can see the objects in the space, which infer, well, there's got to be space, there's objects. Maybe not. Take nothing for granted. So here we are again, endeavoring to understand the teachings of the Buddha. Living Buddha is here. Not just here, but here, there, in the window, everywhere. So ask me some questions, bring this information out, yes.
I had a few questions, and I was wondering, one, is the basic nature of the heart sadness?
Basic nature is emptiness. Basic nature is empty. So, but when we stop roiling around here and arguing up here, panicking or whatever, and we begin to find this seed of awakening, this bodhichitta, there can be sadness about it. There's kind of an understanding that the ego is, self-centeredness is somehow not going to get anywhere, or it's going to be left out, or isn't going to be protected. So there's a sadness. The struggle is gone from here, and the commentary is gone from here, but the emotion or the feeling is sad.
Is that sadness arising out of that heart, or is it the tension between that and our desires that causes?
There's some of that. I mean, you could go in and parse it out in different ways and divide it up and point to different areas of it. Fundamentally, it's just that. If it goes in other directions, then it starts to get more of a story about it, more of an elaboration. And then there's some kind of hope that maybe we might be able to get out of this. Hope and fear, So we're starting to sink back down into this. Questions about hope and fear are good if you have them. What? Yes.
Is it perpetual vulnerability?
It's vulnerability in that if you take note of it, you notice that you're not protecting anything. And so therefore but as you're functioning, the sadness may be there, but you're not particularly thinking about, I'm sad because I'm not protecting, or I'm sad because I'm so vulnerable. The vulnerability might be a description of, it might arise if you're thinking about that, then you'll just notice, well, yeah, I guess I am vulnerable because I have no story about it, about who I am, what I am. I feel no need to justify anything. More?
So when the raw heart meets fear, what happens?
The raw heart doesn't really meet fear. This is where the fear is. Fear. Remember, just go back to the last time you felt fear. Where was it at? I'm not saying there might be something up here, some commentary, but basically it's in the solar plexus. Wouldn't you say?
Could you say again what the sadness part is?
So I wouldn't want to say too much about it because I think it's yours and it would be your understanding of it. But the sad part is part of a disappointment. And maybe we don't even know what it is. We're not sure what it is, but we realize there's something that's the hopes that we had for something wonderful to happen or some kind of great situation, some kind of fruition to happen based on our idea of what that fruition would be, like really happy all the time, very peaceful all the time. Instead, we're not saying that may not come about, but one wouldn't be too concerned if that occurred. One would not necessarily want to replace that with, there's something about, that's what it's called, Trungpa Rinpoche calls it heart of genuine. It's actually, there's some kind of basic realism to it, but it's empty. More.
Could you say how that might be different from the sadness that arises through our thinking or through our gut?
I think that's extra. It has the support of the gut, has the support of the thinking process. So there's always some possibility of that coming to an end, but heart of genuine sadness or the raw heart is just that, and there isn't any getting out of it. I'm not saying that you walk around all day long with some kind of terrible feeling in your chest. It's not exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying it's just raw. It's also great longing. It's also great bodhichitta. If you're functioning everywhere you're functioning, whatever you're doing, if you do a check to see what's going on with you, you notice you're all about other people. They don't know that you're no longer particularly involved with your own. I'm not saying you won't go brush your teeth because you got to spend that time with other people. I'm not saying you won't take care of yourself, but your main intention is to help others, meet others where they're at. If you receive these vows, I don't know what happens if you do it casually. Maybe something would happen, probably would. But if you do it formally, it's really powerful. That's why I say to people, don't do it. Don't do it unless you have to. Don't ask for precepts, and I'll even help you there. You ask me, and I'll probably turn you down at least once. Maybe not. Depends on who you are. Yes.
If we're helping others, will we know it?
you'll be able to say what I'm saying somewhat, or what anyone else would say. You'll be able to talk about it. But fundamentally, you're not really separate from others. So that kind of comes into play also, insofar as we're in a relative situation. There's this, and then there's just seeing that you're always looking for, as it says in the precepts, the benefit of others. There's always benefit of others. And it's not, yes.
Does it look any different than helping yourself?
If that shows up, that sounds suspect.
How do you mean?
Exactly like I said it. Want to paraphrase what I just said to him?
Don't believe what shows up.
That's very good, yeah. Don't believe your thoughts, because that kind of thing is it will trick you. It will trick you into settling into, I'm helping others. If you, I'm sure I'm talking about it, but I don't have any credential for doing that. I'm not going to follow up my statement with all the things I've done for others today. There are no others. That's why it's so powerful, and that's why there's a raw heart. Good question. Good paraphrase, yes.
From Hakaran over in St. Joe, Michigan. She asks, how can we keep our intentions not motivated by hope and fear, or how to utilize hope and fear?
Very good. So, Hakaran, it's to see the hope, see the wishing for something else, and to see the fear that something else you're wishing for is not going to happen. Or see that something that's going to happen that you did not wish for is starting to happen, and not doing anything with it. Not tamping it down, not fluffing it up, doing nothing with it, but just not separating yourself from it. Very difficult to do. And this is why we need shikantaza, zazen, meditation practice. We need to sit down over and over and over again and return to this, return to the Buddha, return to the Dharma, return to the Sangha, one of the ways that it's characterized in Jukai. Seito.
You talk about everything that we encounter being dependently arisen. What about the space that it arises in? Is that also dependently arisen?
So space is used as a way of understanding the mind, understanding phenomena. So everything is dependent on something else, on other situations where it's apparent identity or singularity. So you could say, in the way you ask about it, I would say yes. I would say the fundamental situation, to take it a little bit further, is space is not separate from what arises in it. So therefore, this is space. This is space. This rawness is the doorway.
Would you be willing to reread that excerpt?
The poem?
The poem.
Mm-hmm. I will if I can get through it. Would you like to read it? You can cry too if you want. It's the top line, it's marked.
Thank you.
You have to let everything go. Buddhahood has to go too. Each thought becomes a demon. Opening your mouth invites trouble. Accept what karma brings and live your life in freedom. Use the Dharma for your practice. Lead your ox to the mill. I was wondering if you could say something about how we can speak skillfully without creating trouble.
Speak skillfully. So this is one of the reasons we have Dharma talks. Several of you gave Dharma talks yesterday, and you could see you're on the spot when you're sitting on the tan and you're talking about a particular topic, especially when it comes to the Buddha's Dharma. It's very easy to get tongue-tied. We just don't know how we can, because whatever we say sounds like a lie, or it sounds like it's not exactly what we're intending, but we do it anyway. So if we try to be too perfect, then that's the self-centeredness coming out, and then it begins to show up as pride. And so, I think it's about being aware of that, not getting rid of the pride, not getting rid of the fear. Like Ashoka, this is the second Dharma talk he's given. It was yesterday, and as you remarked earlier, or yesterday, that it's a pretty difficult topic, how the ethics show up in the precepts. Just one precept alone is difficult to give a talk on.
You said that particular poem, or that part of the poem, was a good example of choicelessness. I'm just wondering how we can interfere less with our everyday life.
So he was saying very specific things, telling you things, don't do this, don't do that. But it's coming out of a space, and since we don't, we have to trust Red Pine's translation is pretty close, probably is. Hard to come from one language to another, especially something that is coming out of Chinese languages and pictograms is not so easy. Whoops. More vodka. It's just water. That was meant to be a joke. So he's saying you have to let everything go. That's not something I would say. And if we were to look at the Chinese characters here, he might not have said it exactly that way. He might have said it differently. Buddhahood has to go too. The idea of getting somewhere. Each thought becomes a demon. So just saying that your thought, if you believe your thoughts, then they'll take you this way and take you that way. On the other hand, if you don't believe them or disbelieve them, it's just like somebody walks in the room, they're just in the room. You believing that they're here doesn't particularly keep them here. You disbelieving doesn't take them away, or ignoring them. So it's just a matter of, to me, my understanding is, rather than saying each thought becomes a demon, which is an image, I would just say, don't believe your thoughts. I'm also not a poet. Opening your mouth invites trouble. Probably every time I open mine. Accept what karma brings. It's just a matter of the whole accepting, rejecting idea. I think we don't really need that. It's just the way I say it is just watch what's coming. Just observe what's coming, and in that way, just by observing something, you're not building up some kind of an acceptor, an image of someone who accepts. Well, I'm just accepting things. I used to really struggle with things, but I meditated, and I just learned to accept things. Need any advice? I'll help you out. Yes.
Can we fall into the same dynamic with creating a receiver?
Yeah. You can fall into any kind of dynamic, but it is not about not doing that so much. It's about seeing it. It's about seeing that you're doing that, seeing that you're full of yourself. Actually seeing that. You don't have to correct that. Isn't that good? It's interesting. You can actually feel your neurosis or your irritation with someone else. Do not have to do anything with it. Especially blame yourself, and especially blame them, or blame your situation, or blame. You don't have to do anything with it. You can just see that it's raw. It's just raw. It's tender, and it's sometimes things are very prickly, and I would say do nothing with them. It's so easy to find blame. It's so easy just to, and you notice if there's some 15 or 20 things sticking in your heart, if you blame, 3 or 4 of them drop out, and then it's not quite so bad. And we just kind of, well, if they hadn't have done that, if they hadn't shown, or if I hadn't, if you hadn't spilled that sake all over the floor, and my addiction to sake wouldn't have arisen, and now I gotta go have sake. Actually, I have an addiction, but I haven't had any sake in, and it's been weeks. Many years. Yes, sir.
Is it relief without blaming?
The understanding of relief is what tends to get turned on its head. Rather than there being some kind of relief, the relief you get is realizing that what's looking for the relief does not exist. And so therefore you get that. The relief or no relief may come or may go. It doesn't make any difference. To someone who has realized, and you've heard me say this, other people say this in different ways, if you're realized, you're not too concerned with how you feel. Happiness, sadness, all, as it says in the sadhana of Mahamudra, all thoughts vanish into emptiness like the imprint of a bird in the sky. Happiness, sadness, things come, we'll see, they feel good, they feel bad, they feel neutral, and they dissolve. And what remains is just this bare attention, just this perception, just body, just the emotions clashing around, just receiving seeing through the sense fields, apparent objects coming in the sense fields, and then the naming of that, which is the 4th skandha. And then the 5th one is all of the sense fields and all their objects all rattling around all the time. Sight, sound, smells, taste, touch, all looking for a self and finding one that's not true, not a true self.
A question from Gyokudo up in Minnesota.
Yes.
She asks, does the raw heart or bodhichitta feel like grief?
It can, you could possibly use that. It can feel like grief. It can feel like remorse. It can feel like how does the verse go that we say? We don't say it formally here. We will eventually. We haven't yet. Where you're receiving vows, you all my acts from beginning of time, passion, aggression, ignorance, I fully avow. I can't remember how that goes. But you're actually, you're not so much like you're apologizing for it. You're just saying, I'm aware of this. I'm aware I've done this. I've done that. And from beginning of time, I've probably made a mess of things all over the place. And it's not so much of like being ashamed, although some cultures might go that direction. Japanese culture might do that a little bit. But it's more like just being aware that your understanding or your self-centeredness was so askew that you actually believed there was somebody that needed to be promoted or needed to be protected, and you probably hurt some people. You might have hurt yourself. Definitely hurt others. My experience of being very young, as I've shared with you before, was I was a thief. Looking back on that, it's just it's painful. But at the time, looking at it, I think, well, who I was, where I was, what I was working with, and my causes and conditions around me, not to blame anything, but the causes and conditions, it was I don't know if you'd call it choiceless, but I was just in a corral with a lot of ponies, with no idea who I was or what was going on. I just knew that I was very afraid. So feeling very happy to stumble into the Buddha's Dharma and meet a true teacher.
What is a true teacher?
Someone who understands what it means to teach. Keep going. I can't talk unless you ask me.
How can we know if we've met a true teacher?
I don't know.
How did you know
what
when
do you
you
think?
met?
It's just choiceless.
Did you have doubts?
Yes, I did. But not enough doubt. I knew my situation, I felt like I had to find some way to work with this. And anywhere I'd looked was not good, because the areas I went, I could see that the areas that I looked in, other than the Dharma, were full of confusion, self-centeredness, presumptuousness, and belief in this and disbelief in that, and it was just difficult. So I just kept looking. You'll know. Robert?
What does it mean to teach?
Pardon me?
What does it mean to teach?
Meet people where they're at and don't meddle with them. So meet someone where they're at. If you're not meeting them where they're at, then you will have presumptions about what they need or don't need based on your projection. If you meet someone where they're at, you're helpless, as they probably are, especially if they think they're somebody and they're trying to get ahead and they're working with their suffering. Usually what you end up doing is listening to them a lot, encouraging them to train their mind. That's what I do. Yes, sir.
How does mutual helplessness help others?
One realizes it, and the other is ignoring it. So there's an imbalance there. It's called samsara. It's called suffering, the wheel of birth and death. The teaching person realizes it, and the person who is there as a student is confused about it. As Dogen says, sentient beings are confused about awakening, and those who are awakened are clear about confusion. That's why I keep saying, and the teachings say, look at the confusion. It's your Dharma gate. This is what comes up, the ugliest thing that comes up tomorrow afternoon at 4, that's in your life. It's a Dharma gate. That, something you don't like, something that comes up in your mind. As you go on the path, it gets more and more refined. Those Dharma gates get so they're very slight, and they have a little edge on them, and they move this way and move that way, and it looks like everything is pretty clear, but there's this one area that's still causing suffering or discontent, and the ego mind wants to fix that, shut it down, cover it up, have ice cream, do something to move that or get rid of that. And I'm not against having ice cream or to having a good time. I'm just saying, take advantage of those situations when they come up in your mind. One more.
I find when something negative comes up, I want to treat it as a Dharma gate. I find myself wanting to put a lot of focus on it. Can that be passion, trying to pull that in?
Well, it could be, but if you do it enough, if you do it repeatedly, together with the sitting practice of meditation, just sitting and you're doing it in your post-meditation or in your life or on the cushion or wherever, then you'll eventually see. So you'll see some of that. You just that you ask the question, you already know that that's the case. Am I correct? Yeah. So you already see that some of that's happening. Do nothing with it. Don't apply pressure. Don't invent upaya or skillful means. Skillful means comes out of wisdom. It isn't something that we kind of have a workshop in the back room and we come up with some skillful means about a particular approach. This doesn't mean that some highly skillful way of working with a situation that's very has a lot of even strategy in it won't just show up or appear. If it just arises spontaneously, that seems to be how it works. Just like this building arose spontaneously. I sat right there in a chair 12 years ago, listening to a talk by someone who was talking about, what were they talking, S training or something? I don't know what it was. This was someone's living room.
I thought it was the work.
Huh?
I thought it was Byron Katie's.
Might have been the work, yeah. Well, there's the person who owns the building has been involved in all kinds of things. I've known him since he was a microscope.
We have to move on.
Don't get pushy.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our yellow chant books. I'd also like to remind everybody about the all day this is Saturday, August 25th. Join us if you can. And we do have donation boxes in the hallway. They're still there. Still receiving your contributions. Also PayPal, online. Checks in the mail. 33 Anderson Court, Battle Creek, Michigan, 49017.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-o-san shi-shi-fu, shi-son bu-sa mo-ko-sa, mo-ko-ja. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.